It is Remembrance Day 2016, a time when we ask you, what do you remember on this day? Many texts in at 306-306. I'll share a few of those with you. And, of course, on the phones, it's 1-877-332-8255. Is there a story of remembrance for you and for your family? Part of your family history, a mom, a dad, an uncle, and aunt, somebody in your family that, regardless of how old you are, you find yourself transported through their stories to a time and to a place you have little understanding of in war. Here's one from Lynn in Saskatchewan. This is a harrowing story. As a little girl, my Uncle Henry used to tell the stories about the round scars on his back that I would poke with my finger. He was in World War II and had been shot 7 times in the back. The Germans in the area were walking looking for survivors, so he played dead. He said it several times. The German soldiers were close enough, he could have touched their boots. He barely breathed. He lay in a field surrounded by dead comrades for 6 days. No food and water until the Germans moved on. He was picked up by medics. He had other stories, but his story of survival resonates with me and will forever. Lynn in Saskatoon. 1-877-332-8255. I don't often do birthday greetings on the show, and I mean that as no disrespect to you, but if you could count the number of times a day somebody says, would you say hello to Uncle so-and-so, and I think, gosh, if we start that, we'd be doing it every day. We'd just be doing birthday greetings for ages, because I can't do a little bit and not do it for you. But some guys deserve a special birthday greeting, and Duncan Spence from St. Aluda turns 90 today. He's a World War II vet. Enlisting at the age of 16, he did it to earn money for his family. Can you imagine at the age of 16, says one of his friends, this man is a beauty, and he's done an awful lot for the town of Indian Head. Duncan Spence, we thank you, sir, and happy birthday. I'm John Gormley, 1-877-332-8255. Who do you remember on this day? Average veteran of the Second World War, and it's interesting that Duncan is 90. The average veteran today is 93 from the Second World War. The average Korean conflict veteran is 85. Now, the numbers are difficult to compute because, gosh, this is one of these odd things where time repeats itself. I don't know about you, but again, I'm a baby boomer, later end of the baby boom, but in the small town I grew up in, there were a couple of really old guys. There was Mr. Colbert. I don't know why that name stuck in my head. Lived down the street from us. They were the World War I vets. Because, of course, this was the 60s and the 70s. They had served and finished in 1918. So they were very elderly people. The World War II vets were our parents. If you were young enough, your grandparents. And I remember as the clock ticked down, all of a sudden, because of course it's only mathematical, once you get to a certain age, it's not just that the population diminishes or dies at a certain rate. Once your average age is over 85 or 90, you're losing hundreds of people a week from a population cohort. And I remember when we thought, oh my goodness, the number of World War I veterans is diminishing. The last veteran passed away 6 years ago, I think, and he was 104, 105 from World War I. There is no one alive today who was a part of World War I. World War II, the reason I'm building up to this is we say the average age is 93. Well, 2 years ago, there were 75,000 World War II vets. But I highly doubt you could even say, well, diminish that by 10 or 15,000. I mean, 2 years ago, the average age was 91, so that number of veterans is falling almost at an exponential rate every month, every year. So it won't be long, with an average age now of 93, before we have no more vets from World War II. Number of people who served in the Second World War, 1 million Canadians. And the loss of life was less in the Second World War than the First. And I think you learned all these numbers in school, but if you didn't, it's instructive. So it's over 1 million Canadians and Newfoundlanders, because of course, remember, Newfoundland at that time wasn't yet a part of Canada. So you had the Newfoundlanders and the Canadians, but it was over 1 million. 47,000 died. In the First World War, 650,000 Canadians enlisted and 68,000 died, more than 1 in 10 in the First World War. And the atrocities of trench warfare in the mud and the extraordinary loss of life. And again, Vimy Ridge marks its 100th anniversary next year. If you go back 100 years from now, the Battle of the Somme was on, and the dispatches coming back. And as you read those dispatches, and I don't know if you've done this, the beauty now of the internet is you can actually pull up scanned pages from different newspapers, including ours, and the battle dispatches, of course, are so distant. It took days to get the message out. It would talk about certain names in certain battles, certain losses, and the numbers, the casualties, 2,300 casualties in this battle or that battle. You know, and we talk about in the entire time in Afghanistan, we lost 158 soldiers. Imagine when you had British and French and Canadian and other Allied troops in World War I, where you had thousands of people dying in one battle. But in all, by the time that conflict ended, and it was called the war to end all wars because of the brutality, the size and the scope, on the battlefields of Belgium and France, 1914 to 1918, 68,000 Canadians died. And then little would the world know that 20 years later, as Adolf Hitler began expansion and began rolling into other countries, 1939, we would go to war with Germany again, in what was called the Second World War. So you know those numbers, but they are astonishingly high casualty rates when you think, particularly in the First World War, and you read some of the accounts where young men, a lot of them in this part of the world, because we were such a new land of immigrants in Saskatchewan in 1913, 1914, a lot of them were young British people here working farm laborers. Some of them were getting land as homesteaders. And for king and country, they dropped everything, jumped on the trains, and off they were into the bloodiest of all wars, the First World War. The South African or Boer War, 7,000 Canadians served in that campaign, and there are 7 books of remembrance. I don't know if you know about this, in the National War Memorial and the National War Museum. It's called the South African/Nile Expedition Book of Remembrance. There are 300 names in that book. So 7,000 Canadians who enlisted in the Boer War, 300 died. The books of remembrance for the First and Second World Wars, again, the names go on and on. The Korean conflict or the Korean War, 27,000.